Roque. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer over at KERV, and this is our episode 2 of KERV's KERV Kast. And today, it's very exciting. We're hosting Anthony Katsur, Tony Katsur, here in Cannes. So again, Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Tony Katsur, CEO of the IAB Tech Lab.
Everyone knows right now, Tony's biggest focus and a huge focus of the industry is on Agentic.
First time I'm hearing that.
So how about we just start off with, can you define what does Agentic mean? And also, how are you recommending the industry delineate between true Agentic and just AI and ML automation? I'm kind of seeing some confusion on that.
Sure. AI is not new to the industry.
Right.
Machine learning, which is effectively a subset of AI, has been used by the industry since the days of the first ad server. So going back to the late 90s, the early aughts, your very first ad servers were built on machine learning. And then that advancements in machine learning have now powered things like modern day DSPs and SSPs and the decision engines they use to decide on when and where an impression should be shown for a buyer or for a publisher, what yields them the greatest amount of revenue combined with advertising performance. So that's been powered by machine learning for, almost 20 years. So that is a form of AI. Agentic, what becomes very different is when this concept known as transformer architectures were introduced by Google about 10 years ago, give or take, 12 years ago, give or take. That's where things started to change, where AI could become more autonomous in its decision making. It was better at self-learning. And that's really what put us on this path to Agentic. Now, the difference between Agentic and what we've known as common uses of AI in the past is it's exactly that. Whereas you're using things like machine learning, but you're giving it explicit inputs to act upon, and it will act upon those inputs explicitly. Agentic is you're giving it more of a goal. So if it's something like, I want to see greater brand lift out of this advertising campaign, you can give Agentic AI that level of instructions, and it will assess the inputs it needs and go out and get the information it may need to hit that specific goal. So it's much more autonomous than past uses of AI, where we were keying explicit instructions into a UI. Where with Agentic, you're speaking to it very much in a natural language fashion, and giving it greater objectives for it to achieve, and it will figure it out. That's the big differentiation.
Got it. I'm noticing a little bit that folks are using Agentic almost as like marketing for their AI and ML. So that's really helpful, because at KERV, we have AI. We've been in the market with AI for almost 10 years, processing video. But we're creating agents, and we're actually unleashing and unveiling one of our planning agents here in Cannes that, to your point, can make decisions on what moments based on a goal for a media planner. And it basically looks at all of our signals across all of our publisher data and recommends sets of moments that they can optimize. So to your point,
your clients are giving KERV just an objective to achieve.
Exactly. Versus,
and then KERV's agents will figure out what it needs to achieve those objectives and then go out and do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus KERV's AI is analyzing the content, and we've been doing that for years. Yep. This agent correlates it to goals.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Exactly. That's a great distinction. How you're using different forms of AI within the KERV platform. There's an agentic form, and they're using more traditional forms of AI, again, to analyze and model out content.
Exactly.
Yeah, very different use case.
Exactly.
Different types of AI are applied.
Exactly. So you just mentioned that this has been in the works for 10 years. What changed over the last 6 to 12 months that's actually turned it from ideas to true, from theoretical to real? Because again, 10 years versus how much we're hearing Agentic in the industry has been, night and day this year compared to last year.
Well, there was a tipping point recently, but I think it has been a gradual progression to this moment over the past 20 years since you spoke at Tech Lab Summit a few weeks ago, and Tim Berners-Lee was on stage. Without the creation of the web and all the work that Sir Tim did and others, Geoffrey Hinton, going all the way back, we can go all back to Alan Turing. Without the creation of the web to basically, effectively create this massive kind of data exhaust mechanism, right? The web throws off a tremendous amount of data. So the data wasn't there in the early days of AI. Now there's tremendous amount of data, right? We see it and we work with it every single day. And then with the evolution of GPUs and the ability to calculate vectors over time, so the advent of video gaming and the creation of the GPU for better graphics rendering, that same type of vector math also applies to computing vectors for AI use. And then I think really the tipping point was just in the last roughly 18 months when Anthropic launched Model Context Protocol, known as MCP, and then Google, fast on the heels of that, launched the agent-to-agent protocol. So I think the launch of MCP and agent-to-agent is really what gave the industry, not just our industry, finance, healthcare, supply chain logistics, really started to give the industry protocols and tools to work with to actually start to work with agentic AI. So I think the tipping point was the launch of MCP, which has now been donated to the Linux Foundation. So it is part of the public record. It's open for all to use. And the agent-to-agent protocol developed by Google also donated to the Linux Foundation. So those are now open source protocols where everyone can take advantage of agentic AI. So I think that was the tipping point. But this has been 20, 25 years for us to get here.
Got it. So on the heels of what you're talking about, congratulations on the big news with WPP launching their big release. You know, KERV has a big connection into premium CTV content. I'd love to kind of hear more about the release and the framework and kind of visionary work that they're laying for the industry.
Yeah, I think it's early days in the WPP announcement. I mean, Lauren Wetzel also spoke at Tech Lab Summit, and she's been abundantly clear that WPP is going to build their own agent framework, their own agent platform. And they're working with parts of the Tech Lab's agentic ad management protocols. We call them AMP for short, for listeners. They're working with parts of our framework. So they're using that as some of the foundational pieces to build out WPP's agentic stack. So, again, I think Lauren was very clear, like they think that is a key asset for WPP to build. So excited to partner with them on that. They're also giving us feedback in terms of where they think we need other standards. That is going to be an ongoing process that we've only just kicked off with them. So I think we'll see more work throughout, not this week, of course, but I think we'll see more work throughout the summer and working with WPP and fleshing out those standards, getting feedback from them on where we can enhance our software development kits for buyer and seller agents. So yeah, that's where we're at with WPP. But yeah, very excited to work with them.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. And we share a lot of the same publishers that were in the announcement. So would love to know seeing that, Paramount, Disney, Fox, were all mentioned in the announcement. Are the agents connecting to their DSPs and SSPs? Like, what do you see the agents doing to the relationships and connectivity between those systems? How is it going to change those worlds, and or does it replace any of those systems?
Oh, I think that's a lot to unpack in that question. I think it's definitely going to streamline and expedite the moment that an agency, in this case WPP, receives a client brief to a campaign going live. I think it's going to shorten that cycle from, historically media planning times can take weeks. I think this will go to days. It will certainly make it, I think, more effective, more efficient. And where and how they're plugging in with all those publishers varies across the board. There's no one archetype. There's no one single way that they're actually integrating with those publishers. So it varies across the board. But the phase one of this, my understanding is that it is about that. How do we get more efficient in understanding the client's needs, discovering the appropriate content and audience, and then actually packaging up some sort of CTV package to execute either in an agentic direct fashion. So think of that as just an agentic upfront, so guaranteed buy in CTV, or do you do some sort of agentically curated PMP, which reflects a lot of the use cases we're hearing in the industry in terms of where agentic is being applied to today. That's not necessarily where it ends up. I think there's other advanced use cases, but that seems to be the focus.
Got it. KERV aligns our strategy there. We think of agentic in a few different buckets. Well, the contextual side, the commerce side, but to your point, the planning engine is where we're seeing the most adoption in the industry so far in terms of the customers that we work with and how to use it. So I'd love your feedback. This is a long-winded. I'm going to make sure everyone listening knows our point of view, but I'd love to get your reactions on where we're focusing in agentic, and of course, any recommendations are always welcome.
Sure.
But we've been processing streams at a very high volume for a long time. We produce so many signals and so much metadata that we're working on an agentic strategy to connect those streams with the demand. So this is a very powerful agent, but more of the less attractive one that's kind of automating work and or connecting work that isn't common inside of the DSPs. It's not a common workflow to connect a stream to an impression down to the signal. So we're working there. Again, I think it's extremely attractive, but to the industry, maybe not a problem everyone sees. We're also looking at all of the signals that we create for our publishers like Warner. We're creating agents that help them kind of do media planning and organize recommended moments for them that connect also product catalogs. So if they gave us several product catalogs, we could recommend moments based on matching of commerce or content or both. And then moving into the media planner, we have an agent that essentially streamlines all of that. So it makes sure that the signals that they see are the signals that the publishers want them to see, still valuing up the supply, but making it a little bit less, they won't see what would hurt the publisher. And the publisher gets a little bit more transparency there while giving the agency more transparency than they've ever had into the moments. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. We're really excited about it, but what do you think?
I think that plays to Agentic AI strengths. You mentioned the amount of data exhaust that KERV puts out in analyzing at a scene level, right? Moments in a movie or a television show. That's a lot of information. And as I said earlier, the ability for agents to kind of sift through massive amounts of data, find signal in that data, and then act on that signal, again, in a semi-autonomous or fully autonomous fashion to then drive. And one of your value props, my understanding, is driving to specific outcomes for an advertiser. Having a KERV agent to be able to, again, sift through all of that data that you're generating at a moment level. There's other third-party data that you can pull into that decisioning. Like, that's where you get to like precision level accuracy around the right ad at the right time to drive the right outcome. Like, that is what agents are great at. It would take humans days or weeks to go through that data. Or, in the current state, as agentic is still very new, you've got to file the ticket to the data scientist. The data scientist then writes the query. They model out the data. They bring it back to you. Like, it democratizes the access to that data. And what humans that can't write SQL or don't have a data scientist background, like, it democratizes their access to that information to then take action on it. So I think the use cases you just outlined is exactly what Agentic AI is designed to do. That's exactly kind of what the architecture should be designed to do. Parse through massive amounts of data, find strong signal to drive towards specific outcomes for advertisers. Like, that's the power of Agentic AI, and it can do it so much faster and so much more efficiently than humans can do it.
That makes a lot of sense. So I want to keep drilling into standardization. Because off of everything you just said, KERV is still trying to figure out, will we be employing our agents into systems that a media planner or buyer will log into, or should our agents communicate to these agents like WPP is launching? What is your thought on that? And also, how does standards help us learn around how and what to do there?
I don't know the explicit answer to your first question. I don't think anybody does, because this is so new. We did some polling. Actually, Optimal did some polling at the Tech Lab Summit, and they polled the room in terms of where people were in their various states of agentic, and it is still super early days. Like, it is the Wild West out there in terms of how folks are integrating, where they're integrating. Should you integrate MCP to MCP? Should you integrate MCP into native API? Like that debate is also being had in the industry as well. So who integrates with who, how it's integrated, I don't know how that shakes out. And I don't think I think anyone, I don't think anyone knows how that shakes out over the next, I think this is going to play out over the next 2 or 3 years.
Right.
When it comes to standards, I think standards are important because at the end of the day, agentic AI is probabilistic in nature. It's not deterministic. It does make mistakes, or it does hallucinate. It screws up. Like, they're probabilistic. And what standards do is it grounds these architectures in a common reference point. So it acts as almost like a Rosetta Stone between two agents speaking to each other. It would be if we were having this podcast and I was speaking French and you were speaking Japanese, we would need some translation layer. Standards act as that translation layer between agents. So when you are giving a buyer agent natural language instructions around a specific audience and some form of outcome and your total budget, when that buyer agent communicates with that seller agent on the other end of that transaction, they have that translation layer between the two of them. So there is not a hallucination between the two. And that's where standards come into play. Standards become those guardrails. Standards become that referenceable context so agents can execute with repeatable accuracy. It's great to hear like the tests of, the campaigns that have been run across the ecosystem, but I think everyone would agree, like it hasn't happened at scale yet, and nor would it, because this is all so new.
Right.
But I mean, we're talking about our industry is approaching $1 trillion TAM, I think, next year. That's a massive global industry. And standards are going to be needed for repeatable accuracy to execute $1 trillion in advertising budgets over the next 5 to 7 years. So that's where standards come into play. Is it acts as the guardrail, the translation layers between the various agentic interactions. And who knows, a lot of the agentic interactions we see today are agent to agent. It's usually a one-to-one agent. Mm-hmm. There is going to be a whole world of orchestration where you're going to have a measurement agent, a buyer agent, a planning agent, a yield agent. Like there's, we're already seeing this cottage industry of agentic startups that are starting to rise to the surface. And I think you're going to see specialization in agentic. And that, when you start to get into, there could be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 agents involved in a single transaction, the propensity to hallucinate and not hand off properly could be a really bad day for folks. And that's where standards come into play.
I do not envy you right now.
Oh, it's fun.
How do you prioritize what to standardize? You just said so many things. I mean, this is just out of my own curiosity.
It's fun and frustrating at the same time. But that's the case with all of Tech Lab standards. They go through various states of adoption, or, some folks will claim, hey, we've solved this. And I'll be like, well, that was solved 10 years ago. Here's the standard that addresses that. So, but it's also, it's moving so fast and it's so innovative. At the same time, it's very fun. How do we prioritize? We talk to the industry. We speak with holdcos, we speak with agencies, large and small. We've been communicating with brands. We've been talking with media companies. We've been talking with ad tech companies. We talk to the industry and we just listen to the most common use cases. And the two common use cases I'm running into right now are agentic curation of direct deals and agentic curation and buying of direct deals, and agentic curation and buying of PMPs. Those seem to be the two common use cases today. There is aspiration in speaking with all of those constituents to do more advanced use cases in the future, but I think we're in this crawl, walk, run. We're just barely crawling now. Yeah. And I think we'll be crawling for the next 2 years, and that's fine, because this is all so new to the industry. So we're just, how we prioritize is we listen to the industry.
Yeah. Well, we're talking back to you. KERV sits on so many of those committees.
I know. You've got some ideas. I think we've got to talk about some content taxonomy stuff as it relates to agentic. Yeah.
Yes.
We want that feedback.
Yeah, we are going to give it to you. I've been in touch with our tech team, but we're playing in both of those ecosystems you just mentioned as well, because we have the direct integrations, like Warner I mentioned earlier. We're integrating into all of their direct ecosystem right now within Freewheel. To figure out how to connect those moments for them there. Mm-hmm. And then to your point on the deal ID side, we are connecting a slew of publishers there. So we're trying to figure out the same thing. So we're very communicative back to you all.
And I think everyone's trying to figure it out. You'll speak, and it's not just an engineering organization or the AdOps organization. What we find is that if an organization is going to commit to some sort of agentic framework, it has to be holistic.
Yeah.
Because you get legal involved, and legal has legitimate questions around like agentic liability. Right? So you have to align that. You have to align ad operations. You have to align finance. How are buys reconciled in an agentic ecosystem? Right. So it's not just, I mean, again, with the test going on now, that's fine. But if we're really going to drive this new kind of agentic wrapper to programmatic, it requires cross-department alignment within an organization.
100%. And KERV likes to be a little bit problematic in we'd like to create more and more data. So in that ecosystem, we're adding creative, and we're adding, of course, the context side of it, but that's not new. You have standards there that we're expanding on, but we also have the commerce piece of it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that threads throughout. And those are two things we'd actually love your feedback on, because we're working on. We released AMP 2.0 about a month and a half ago. AMP 2.1 is shipping this month, July, and then we're working on AMP 3, so Agentic Ad Management Protocols. AMP 3.0 is going to ship in August. And two things we're looking at in that next rev of the standards and the SDKs we're building are commerce and creative. We're ready.
So definitely would love your feedback on this.
We are ready. So do you think the industry is underestimating the complexity inside of the media planning and buying ecosystems? What is your perspective on that?
No, I don't think they're underestimating it. I mean, we eat, sleep, and breathe it all the time. I think depending on the client, depending on the campaign, I think there's varying degrees of complexity, but it's nothing that agencies haven't been dealing with for 70 years.
Yeah.
If it's a multi-channel, multi-environment, multi-format campaign, that's more complex, right? I think it also depends on the brand, and the product can introduce different types of complexities. If they're looking for different types of outcomes in the campaign. But I don't think as an industry, I don't think we've underestimated it. I think everyone I've spoken with, particularly on the agency side, has a pretty good grasp of what they want to tackle first. And no one I've spoken with is like, hey, let's do the hardest. Let's use agents to tackle the hardest buying and planning exercise we've ever done. No, everyone's starting simple. Everyone's starting with.
Circling back, taking your answer and circling back to something we talked about earlier, on the heels of that, you have the SSPs launching DSPs. You have the SSPs launching agents, and then you have WPP's release, I'm imagining, has an agent that's working inside of their DSP to SSP infrastructure. How do you see that kind of firming out? Like, PubMatic has been in the news with their own agent, and then you have Magnite talking about agents recently, but then they also have Clearline. That's kind of where that last question came from in terms of the simplification that's needed, or are we underestimating the complexity? How are you seeing those things kind of coming together? I think we're radically underestimating the complexity between the DSP and SSP dynamic. I don't think DSPs and SSPs go away. I think decisioning will shift, but the way I've thought about it, if DSPs are like the Formula One engines of performance. If you have to hit a specific performance target, whether it be a CPA or CPC or a specific outcome or prove out incrementality, DSPs are really, really, really good at that. Right. Are there other types of buys that could shift more to sell-side decisioning, maybe with some light controls by a buyer agent? Sure, upper funnel metrics, upper funnel campaigns, reach and frequency, managing to a brand yield curve. Yeah, that could potentially happen within the SSP. But I don't see the SSP DSP dynamic changing anytime soon. I think it's a question of just where the decisioning will shift to, and I think that could vary based on brand, based on product, based on campaign type, and requirements from the brand on what outcomes they're expecting for that campaign.
I think is where you'll see those shifts occur. But I don't see the DSP SSP dynamic changing dramatically in the near future. 5 years from now, maybe that's a different story, but over the next couple of years, I don't see that changing.
Yeah, we would agree. It's just interesting to see some of these investments on the SSP side into the planning side agents. Some of them make a lot of sense when they're really, really close to the supply. You can read between the lines there.
Sure.
But with that being said, I feel it is interesting because the amount of data that the DSP has in terms of the setups and the line items and the outcome connectivity, that's not the same data that the SSP is sitting on.
Absolutely, the SSP, yeah, that's exactly right.
Very different.
There's data the SSP doesn't have access to, that the DSP has access to, and vice versa. And I also think, again, the DSP's ability to act upon that oceans of data in a way that is incredibly efficient, that is, there's a defensible moat there, and I just don't see that moat being broken down.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm really keen to understand how they're all going to connect, because perhaps the planning agent at the SSP is going to be needed to pass that intent transparency that we talked about at the IAB Tech Lab Summit. So perhaps that agent is going to be a required part of the ecosystem. But in terms of the standards, we're still writing them.
So. Well, there's companies out there doing, that bid level enrichment at an impression level. I mean, there's Chalice AI, there's Biddable Assets, there's several companies out, Gamera now, they're all operating, leveraging the Agentic real-time framework, which is part of AMP, which was the containerization spec where we put a MCP front end on top of. They're living within SSP cloud architectures. Chalice lives within the Index cloud. And it's enriching that bid stream so a DSP like a Trade Desk or others could act upon that. So we're seeing that kind of agentic enrichment of the bid stream, or as Ray, the CTO from Index, calls it, the hot path. We're seeing that happen already, and that's powered agentically.
Right.
So when people want to talk about agentic use cases, one could argue literally millions of dollars in transactions have already been powered via agentic approaches using the ARTF spec.
Got it. What do you see coming in the next 6 to 9 months? Let's call it.
I think it's more of the same. I think it's more of. I think there's still a lot of testing. There's a lot of publishers out there that are, that haven't dipped their toe in the pond. Either they don't have the engineering resources. Not every media company has engineering resources to develop a seller agent. Some are downright skeptical. Does this represent incremental revenue for me or not? And I think that's the right question for publishers to ask. What's on the other end of all this for me? Agencies are still, figuring it out and testing. The entire industry is still figuring this out. So I think the next 6 to 9 months is a lot more of the same. I think a lot of testing, a lot of learning. I think, frankly, we're probably in this stage of experimentation, innovation, testing, innovating again. I feel like I don't think we'll see. I also think that the proof points of where does agentic make sense, everywhere, and we're going to hear this all this week in camp. Everything's an agent. It's a lot of times agents get described to me, and half the time I'm like, that's just an API. That's not an agent. So I also think
beginning of this chat.
I also think the industry is going to take the next 18, 24 months to figure out, where does it make sense to introduce agentic? Because it doesn't necessarily make sense everywhere to introduce agentic. The investment may not be worth the return. So I think there's going to be a combination of figuring it out from a business outcomes perspective and a business ROI perspective, and also what's working technically versus not. What drove real efficiency? What drove real effectiveness? Is where I think we're going to collectively learn together as an industry, and I think that's going to play out. My prediction, I think 2028 is where I think we see it start. I think there's a tipping point there where we start to see, the benefits and the value of where agentic makes sense. And also this merging of agentic and, I'm not a huge fan of the dichotomy of agentic versus programmatic. I think at the end of the day, it's all programmatic. But I think this meshing of where agentic and programmatic actually do start to come together. I think we won't realize that for another couple of years.
Got it. I would agree with your last point very violently because we
You're gonna get violent and can.
we love programmatic, but we have all these signals, so we're so excited about the agents because the humans haven't been able to. Even the best traders in the world can't process.
It's a lot of data.
It's too much data. So we're really excited. But I kind of see, on top of what you were saying, I'm seeing Agentic actually create this interesting overlap between the programmatic and direct publisher businesses. Because if you're thinking about the WPP deal and all the publishers listed there, to your point, it's going to amplify and make their upfront work harder. And companies like us are adding signals, and the signals are being put into their upfronts and then also ad hoc one-off deals, programmatic remnant, et cetera. So when we are creating our agents in connection with the agency and the publisher, I believe, and KERV is just an example of this from a contextual commerce perspective, and I think it's going to make the business terms of the upfronts even more interesting.
Absolutely.
Because it's going to force this overlap that, again, this is nothing new. It's almost just like a reframe of when programmatic came into the upfronts and they had to allow some sort of remnant.
But how long did that take? How long was that shift? 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think this is going to be another long-term shift.
Well, in between, since that 5 years and this one, you had COVID, which allowed the agencies to renegotiate how they reallocated budget inside of their upfront. So now this is a bit of a blend of both of those.
Yeah.
So I foresee that happening in the next, I can't say 6 to 9 months because the upfronts will be renegotiated next year.
Right.
So I would violently agree with your 2028 point, because I think that the upfronts will be negotiated differently and this gray area will be part of that. And KERV is very excited about that because we've had to sit in these two buckets that are just who's buying the same thing and how. And Agentic is going to, I don't want to say clean it up because it's not dirty, but it's going to make it work.
It'll organize it.
And make it work harder for both parties. So I'm very excited about that in terms of where we sit.
I think applying Agentic to the ecosystem just makes the ecosystem smarter, no matter how you're buying, whether it's a direct buy or a programmatic buy. I just think it makes the ecosystem more efficient. And a canary in the coal mine to capitalize on your point, at the IAB New Fronts this year, I mean, Agentic was front and center in almost every media company pitch. Agentic was in their pitch. So that, I mean, and again, this is something that's been around for 10 months in our industry, and the New Fronts were 2 months ago. So 8 months into the industry, and Agentic was in every pitch. So I think you're right. I think that's going to be front and center in future pitches.
What do you think some of the very specific tasks on the media planner and buyer side that Agentic will start to do the quickest?
Oh, I think your initial parsing of the client brief and crafting a media plan outline, that will go from days and weeks to literally minutes. So I think just radical efficiency at the planning stage. On the buying side, I think content and audience discovery also becomes much more efficient. What I am hearing consistently throughout the industry from buyers and sellers is that agents will not be negotiating pricing anytime soon. that is still going to be a human to human interaction from both parties. Everyone's like, nope, my agent is not going to negotiate pricing. That's still going to be a meeting, a Zoom, an email, a phone call is where pricing will get discussed. The agents won't be allowed to do that.
That makes sense.
So,
well, humble brag, we're giving kind of just first look beta access, but we are releasing here in Cannes a look into our planning tool that does exactly what you just mentioned. So an agency planner can pop a brief in their outcome requests and whatnot, and it maps our moments, and even commerce, if they have a catalog, they can put the catalog in, and it matches our publishers' signals to their moments in a way that's very transparent and connected to intent of their brief.
That is the common use case we're coming across.
Awesome. So we're aligned.
You are aligned.
Humble brag.
You're coming at just the right time. Right point. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, just lightening it up. We're at Cannes. What are you most excited about? I know this is almost your day one. What are you most excited about? What is IAB Tech Lab most excited about this can 2026?
We've got a lot of engagement this year with brands directly. I'd
Okay.
say the most we've ever had with brands directly at Can, and Tech Lab we don't get to brands as often as we would like. And I really think our industry starts with the brand. I've always had the saying, there's a little bit of P&G in everyone's paycheck. And I believe that since I first coined that phrase. So I think our level of brand engagement this year is something I'm excited about. We're meeting with a lot of brands this year, and of course, the topic is AI. There's a little bit of CTV in there. We're talking a little bit of CTV with some of the brands. So I think our level of brand engagement is great. This year, we're doing our Marketecture media hot takes on Wednesday. So I'm excited for the tie-in with the Marketecture media folks. We have so many folks coming in to do that. I think either you or Gary are coming in for that, right?
Yep. Gary's doing it.
So we're excited. We're excited for that. And then I don't know, it's just always a privilege to be at Can. I mean, how many industries do you know that, all jet away to the south of France for 4 or 5 days? And
not many.
Talk about future of the industry. I mean, it's just fortunate to be here.
Yeah, I feel the same. We're lucky. And then we get to have these amazing conversations.
Right.
I love that everyone is so focused. So the meetings that we're having, they're very deliberate. They're always deliberate, but this year it feels even more like folks where the right people are in the room. They're gathering around to respond quickly to what's happening. They want to be part of the solution. And we get to be looking at an amazing
There's no event like it.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, like I feel like Can always there's this soft purpose here where you don't necessarily close a deal at Can, but you certainly soft close it and you set yourself up for the close when you're all back in your respective offices. I've never had a Can, even prior to Tech Lab when I was all for profit, I've never had a Can not result and not have some ROI.
Yeah. On the direct brand side, how are they connecting into standards? I know I just said I'd keep it light on you, but I'm just thinking about you meeting with brands, and it's almost like Agentic and AI for the agency was giving them even more purpose in an industry where the brands are pulling things back. So how are they connecting to standardizing and?
Well, I think it's more curiosity of what Agentic can do for their businesses. So the conversations we're having are exactly that. Like, explain Agentic AI. What can it do for my business? How do I work with my agency to actually activate that? Do we want to do some of our own testing so we're more informed? So our conversation with the brands this week is a blend of all of those things. Help me understand more. How do I test directly? What do I need to do to engage with my agency? And a lot of my talking point is your data.
Yeah.
Make sure it's clean. If there was ever a time for the industry writ large to clean up their data backends, like now's the time, right? Agentic is good at sifting through massive amounts of data, but the cleaner that data is, the less prone you will be to errors when using Agentic AI. So that's a lot of the talk we're having with brands as well. So a lot of our conversations this week is they're just exploring concepts of Agentic and what should I do? Do I do anything? Like, my agency has pitched me on this. Like, how do I approach this? So it's really them wanting to just learn more about Agentic AI.
Got it. That's helpful. We have recommended cleaning up their data for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Same
with publishers.
Yes. And when we're adding more, so on the publisher side, we're adding more. And on the brand side, we're getting access to their product catalogs, that we've actually realized that a lot of the data they're not sharing back. It's actually not a transparency thing. It's because the data isn't clean enough. So really helpful to hear that from you. Well, thank you so much, Tony, for being part of KERV KAST and
my pleasure.
Just being a friend and colleague. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for
having
having
an amazing
me.
can.
You too.